The distant rumble of the approaching train shook the earth beneath Naomi Harrington's bound wrists, her terrified screams muffled by the filthy bandana tied cruelly across her mouth. This wasn't how her journey west was supposed to end, tied to the cold metal tracks outside Westcliffe, Colorado, left to die because she'd witnessed something she shouldn't have. The spring sun beat down mercilessly as she struggled against her bonds, the metal rails beneath her back beginning to vibrate with the approaching locomotive's deadly weight. Naomi had arrived in Westcliffe just 3 days prior, stepping off the stagecoach with hopes of building a new life as the town's schoolteacher. At 22, she had left behind her family in Boston after her father's passing left them with mounting debts. The teaching position promised a modest salary and living quarters above the schoolhouse, a fresh start in the untamed West. The first 2 days had been uneventful. She'd settled into her small quarters, met with the town council, and prepared for classes to begin the following Monday. It was on the 3rd day when everything changed. She had been walking back from the general store when she witnessed 3 men in dark dusters exchanging something behind the saloon. One man had his face clearly visible, a jagged scar ran from his eye to his jaw. When he noticed her watching, his cold eyes narrowed dangerously. She'd hurried away, pretending not to have seen anything, but it was too late. That night, they'd broken into her quarters, dragged her from her bed and brought her here, miles from town where no one could hear her screams. The 3:15 to Denver don't stop in Westcliffe, the scarred man had sneered, tossing her onto the tracks. You'll be nothing but a stain when they finally find what's left of you. Naomi's tears blurred her vision as the vibrations intensified. The train was coming faster now. She could hear its whistle in the distance. She closed her eyes, saying a silent prayer when the sound of pounding hoofbeats cut through her terror. "Hold on," a deep voice called out. Through tear-filled eyes, Naomi saw a figure on horseback racing toward her. The rider hunched low over the animal's neck as they thundered across the open plain. The horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, slid to a stop just yards away, and the rider dismounted in one fluid motion. He knelt beside her, and Naomi found herself staring into the most intense blue eyes she'd ever seen. The man wore a worn leather hat pushed back on his head, revealing dark hair streaked with sun. His face was tanned and weathered, but not unkind. "Don't move," he instructed, pulling a knife from his boot. The train whistle screamed again, much closer now. The man worked quickly, sawing through the ropes binding her to the tracks. His hands were strong but gentle as he freed first her ankles, then her wrists. The ground was shaking violently beneath them as he finally cut the gag from her mouth. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice urgent. Naomi nodded, though her limbs felt like jelly. The man grabbed her around the waist and practically carried her away from the tracks. They'd barely made it 20 feet when the train thundered past, its massive iron wheels grinding against the spot where she'd lain moments before. The force of the passing train whipped her hair around her face and nearly knocked them both over. The man held her steady until the last car had passed, leaving nothing but swirling dust and the fading sound of the engine in its wake. "Thank you," Naomi gasped, her voice hoarse from screaming. "You saved my life." "Name's Kieran Thomas," he replied, still supporting her weight. "Most folks just call me Kit." "Naomi Harrington," she managed, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. She could smell leather and horses and something distinctly masculine. "I'm the new school teacher, or was supposed to be." Kit's expression hardened. "Who did this to you?" "I don't know their names. 3 men. One had a scar." She shuddered. "I saw them behind the saloon yesterday exchanging something. They must have thought I'd report them." "The Bennett gang," Kit said grimly. They've been causing trouble all over the territory." Naomi swayed on her feet, the reality of her near-death experience catching up to her. Kit caught her before she could fall. "Easy now," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. Naomi was acutely aware of his chest against her back as he reached around her for the reins. She'd never been this close to a man who wasn't family before, but given the circumstances, propriety seemed the least of her concerns. "Where are you taking me?" she asked as the horse set off at an easy trot. "My ranch is about 3 miles from here. You'll be safe there while we figure out what to do about Bennett and his boys. You live alone, just me and a couple of ranch hands. It's not much, but it's home." There was something in his tone that suggested a story, but Naomi was too exhausted to ask. They rode in silence for a while, the gentle rocking motion of the horse almost lulling Naomi to sleep despite her ordeal. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her drained and sore where the ropes had cut into her skin. "How did you find me?" she finally asked. "Luck," Kit replied. "I was riding the boundary of my property when I heard the train whistle. Something made me look toward the tracks. Saw something that didn't belong there." He paused. "Good thing I was curious." "Very good thing," Naomi agreed fervently. The landscape around them was beautiful in a rugged way, rolling hills covered in scrub brush, the majestic Rocky Mountains rising in the distance. Under different circumstances, Naomi might have appreciated the view. As they crested a small rise, a modest ranch house came into view. It was well built, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. A barn and corral stood nearby, along with several outbuildings. It wasn't grand, but it looked comfortable and well maintained. "That's it," Kit said. "Not much to look at, but it serves its purpose." "It looks lovely," Naomi said honestly. After what she'd just experienced, any safe haven seemed like paradise. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, his hand resting casually on the gun at his hip until he recognized Kit. Then his eyes widened at the sight of Naomi. "Everything all right, boss?" he called out, hurrying to meet them. "Sam, this is Miss Harrington. She's had some trouble with the Bennett gang. Miss Harrington, this is Sam Wilkes, my foreman." Sam touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Madam, she'll be staying with us for a while," Kit continued. "Would you mind letting Maria know we'll have a guest for dinner? And see if she can find something clean for Miss Harrington to wear." "Right away." Sam hurried toward a small cabin near the main house. Kit dismounted first, then reached up to help Naomi down. Her legs buckled as soon as her feet touched the ground, and Kit caught her effortlessly. "Sorry," she murmured, embarrassed by her weakness. "Nothing to be sorry for," he replied. "Most folks would be in a lot worse shape after what you've been through." He led her into the house, which was simply but comfortably furnished. A stone fireplace dominated one wall of the main room, with a worn leather sofa and several chairs arranged around it. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with more volumes than Naomi would have expected to find in a rancher's home. "You can sit by the fire while I get some water heated," Kit said. "You look half frozen despite the sun." Naomi hadn't realized she was shivering until he mentioned it. She sank gratefully into a chair near the fireplace, extending her hands toward the warmth. Kit disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a wool blanket that he draped around her shoulders. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, sending an unexpected tingle up Naomi's arm. "Thank you," she said, pulling the blanket tighter. "For everything." "Just doing what anyone would do." Kit's modesty seemed genuine. "I think we both know that's not true." Naomi's voice caught. "Most men would have ridden the other way rather than risk their lives for a stranger." Before Kit could respond, the door opened, and a middle-aged woman with dark hair streaked with gray entered, carrying a bundle of clothing. "Maria," Kit said, "this is Miss Harrington. Dios mío, what happened to you, Niña?" Maria exclaimed, taking in Naomi's disheveled appearance and the rope burns on her wrists. "The Bennett gang," Kit explained grimly, "tied her to the train tracks." Maria crossed herself. "Those devils! Come, Miss Harrington, let's get you cleaned up. I have hot water ready in the washroom." Naomi allowed herself to be led away, casting one last glance at Kit over her shoulder. He stood watching her, his expression unreadable. The washroom was small but clean, with a copper tub filled with steaming water. Maria helped Naomi undress, clucking sympathetically at the bruises forming on her pale skin. "That poor dress is ruined," Maria said, setting aside Naomi's torn and dirty garment. "But this should fit you well enough." The dress Maria had brought was simple dark blue cotton with white piping but clean and neat. There was also a chemise, drawers, and stockings. "These belonged to Senor Kit's sister," Maria explained as she helped Naomi into the tub. "She left them when she moved east with her husband." "Mr. Thomas has a sister?" Naomi asked, wincing as the hot water touched her abrasions. "She, Isabella, she married a banker from St. Louis 3 years ago." Maria handed Naomi a bar of soap that smelled of lavender. "Senor Kit has been alone since then. What about his parents?" "Gone many years now. His father built this ranch but died when Senor Kit was just 18. His mother followed a year later." Maria shook her head sadly. "The fever took her. Senor Kit has kept the ranch going since then." Naomi absorbed this information as she scrubbed away the dirt and fear of her ordeal. By the time she had dressed in the borrowed clothes and Maria had helped her comb the tangles from her hair, she felt almost human again. When they returned to the main room, Kit was seated at a large wooden table studying a map. He stood as she entered, his eyes widening slightly at her transformed appearance. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much, thank you." The dress was a bit loose around the waist but otherwise fit reasonably well. "Your sister's clothes are very nice." A shadow crossed Kit's face at the mention of his sister, but he nodded. "Bella always had good taste. Please sit down. Maria's making stew for dinner." Naomi took a seat opposite him, noticing for the first time how handsome he was. Not in a polished, city way, but with the rugged appeal of a man who worked outdoors and knew his own strength. His hands were calloused but clean, and despite his worn clothes, there was a dignity about him that spoke of self-respect. "We need to talk about what happens next," Kit said, returning to the map. "Bennett and his men won't be happy that you escaped. They'll be looking for you." Naomi's stomach clenched at the reminder. "Do you think they'll come here?" "Not if they value their lives," Kit said with quiet menace. "But we need to get word to the sheriff in town. Tying someone to train tracks isn't just mischief, it's attempted murder." "I was supposed to start teaching on Monday," Naomi said, her voice small. "What will happen to my position?" "First things first," Kit said firmly. "Let's keep you alive, then worry about your job." Naomi nodded, though the thought of losing her fresh start before it had even begun was disheartening. "I have no place else to go," she admitted. "My parents are both gone, and my brothers are scattered, one in California mining gold, the other at sea. The teaching position was my chance to be self-sufficient." Kit studied her for a long moment. "You're welcome to stay here until this is sorted out. It's not fancy, but it's safe." "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. We have the room, and frankly, Maria would appreciate the female company." As if on cue, Maria emerged from the kitchen, carrying a steaming pot of stew. The smell made Naomi's stomach growl, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the previous night. The meal was simple but delicious beef stew with potatoes, carrots, and fresh baked bread. Naomi hadn't realized how hungry she was until she took the first bite. She ate 2 full servings before finally sitting back satisfied. "That was wonderful, Maria, thank you." "De nada." Maria smiled, clearly pleased. "You needed it. Too skinny." After dinner, they sat in the main room as the sun began to set. Kit stoked the fire while Naomi watched, her mind still reeling from the day's events. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town and talk to Sheriff Dawson," Kit said. "He's a good man. He'll want to hear your story firsthand, but we can arrange for him to come here rather than risk you going into town." "Thank you," Naomi said. "I feel so helpless." "You survived being kidnapped and tied to railroad tracks," Kit pointed out. "I'd hardly call that helpless." Naomi managed a small smile. "I suppose not, though I'd have been dead if not for you." "Get some rest," Kit said, standing. "Maria's made up the room at the end of the hall for you. It has a lock on the door if that makes you feel safer." Naomi nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. As she followed Maria to her room, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. The bed looked impossibly inviting, covered with a colorful quilt and several pillows. "Sleep well, Nina," Maria said, lighting a small lamp on the bedside table. "You are safe here." Alone in the room, Naomi changed into a borrowed nightgown and slipped between the cool sheets. Despite her fatigue, she lay awake for a long time, reliving the terror of being bound to those tracks, hearing the trains approach. But when sleep finally claimed her, it wasn't the scarred face of her kidnapper that followed her into dreams, but the intense blue eyes of the man who had saved her. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the smell of coffee brewing. Naomi dressed quickly in yesterday's borrowed dress and followed the scent to the kitchen, where she found Kit already at the table, dressed for riding. "Good morning," he said, looking up from his plate of eggs. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Naomi admitted, taking the seat Maria indicated. "Thank you again for your hospitality." "Think nothing of it," Kit replied. "I'll be heading to town after breakfast to speak with Sheriff Dawson. Sam and the boys will be around the property, and Maria will be here with you. No one will bother you." Naomi nodded, though anxiety flickered through her at the thought of him leaving, which was ridiculous. She'd only known him a day. After breakfast, Kit saddled his horse while Naomi watched from the porch. The morning was cool, with a light breeze stirring the grass. "I should be back by mid-afternoon," Kit said, swinging into the saddle. "Try not to worry." "That seems unlikely," Naomi replied with a wry smile, "but I'll do my best." Kit tipped his hat to her, then urged his horse into a trot, heading for the road that led to town. Naomi watched until he disappeared from sight, then returned inside where Maria was clearing the breakfast dishes. "Can I help?" Naomi asked. "No need," Maria said. "But if you want something to do, there's mending in the basket by the window." Grateful for the distraction, Naomi spent the morning repairing shirts and socks, her fingers remembering the skills her mother had taught her. As she worked, Maria told her stories about the ranch and its history. "Senor Kit's father came here when there was nothing but wild land," Maria said. "Built everything you see with his own hands. Senor Kit was born in this house, just like his sister." "How long have you been with the family?" Naomi asked. "Since before Senor Kit was born. My husband, Eduardo, was Senor Thomas's foreman until he passed 5 years ago." Maria's eyes grew distant with memory. "This place is home now." The morning passed quietly. Around noon, Maria prepared a simple lunch of cold chicken and bread, which they ate at the kitchen table. Naomi was just helping to clear the dishes when the sound of approaching horses caught their attention. Maria moved to the window, her expression darkening. "Stay inside," she instructed, hurrying to a cabinet and removing a shotgun. "It's not Senor Kit." Naomi's heart began to pound. "The Bennett gang." "I don't know," Maria said grimly, checking that the gun was loaded. "But whoever it is, they're not welcome." Through the window, Naomi could see 3 riders approaching. Her breath caught when she recognized the man in front, the same scarred face that had leered down at her as she was tied to the tracks. "It's them," she whispered, backing away from the window. "They've found me." "Go to your room and lock the door," Maria said firmly. "I'll handle this." Naomi hesitated. "I can't let you face them alone. I have lived on this frontier for 40 years, Nina. This is not my first encounter with bad men." Maria's eyes flashed with determination. "Now go." Reluctantly, Naomi retreated to her room, locking the door as instructed. Through the window, she could see the men dismounting in the yard. The scarred man was saying something to his companions, gesturing toward the house. One of the others laughed, a sound that chilled Naomi's blood even through the glass. She heard Maria open the front door, heard the sharp crack of her voice, though she couldn't make out the words. Then the scarred man's reply, louder and threatening. Naomi looked around desperately for something she could use as a weapon, settling on a heavy brass candlestick from the dresser. The sound of a shotgun blast made her jump. It was followed by shouting and the thunder of hoofbeats, the men retreating. Naomi rushed to the window in time to see the 3 riders galloping away, one of them clutching his arm. She hurried back to the main room to find Maria standing in the open doorway, shotgun still raised. "Are you all right?" Naomi asked. Maria lowered the weapon, her hands steady despite what had just happened. "They won't be back soon. I put some buckshot in that one's shoulder." "You're incredible," Naomi said with genuine admiration. Maria allowed herself a small smile. "I told you, not my first time dealing with bad men." She closed the door and bolted it. "But they will be back, and with more men. We should prepare." They spent the next hour securing the house, closing shutters, moving furniture to block the less sturdy doors, and bringing in supplies from the root cellar in case they needed to withstand a siege. It was mid-afternoon when they heard another horse approaching. Both women tensed until Maria, peering through a crack in the shutters, breathed a sigh of relief. "It's Senor Kit," she announced, "and Sheriff Dawson with him." Naomi felt a rush of relief so intense it made her dizzy. She followed Maria to the door, which they unbolted to admit Kit and a tall man wearing a silver star on his vest. Kit's eyes immediately sought Naomi, relief visible on his face when he saw she was unharmed. "The Bennett gang was in town earlier," he said without preamble. "I was worried they might come here." "They did," Maria confirmed grimly. 3 of them. I sent them away with a reminder of their manners." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "Did you now, Maria?" "One of them will need a doctor for his shoulder," she replied with a hint of satisfaction. "If he can find one willing to treat him." "That's my Maria," Kit said with a proud smile. "Miss Harrington, this is Sheriff James Dawson. Sheriff, this is Miss Naomi Harrington." "Madam." The sheriff tipped his hat respectfully. "Kit's told me what happened." "I'd like to hear your account if you're up to it." Naomi nodded. They gathered around the table, and she told her story from the beginning, arriving in Westcliffe, witnessing the exchange behind the saloon, being kidnapped from her room, and finally, being tied to the tracks to await certain death. If Mr. Thomas hadn't come along when he did. She shuddered, unable to finish the thought. The sheriff's face had grown increasingly grim as she spoke. "This is beyond the usual for the Bennett gang," he said. "They've robbed stage coaches and rustled cattle, but attempted murder of an innocent woman. That's crossing a line even they've respected until now." "What can we do?" Kit asked. "They clearly know she's here." "I've sent telegrams to the marshals in Denver and to the sheriffs in neighboring counties," Dawson replied. "Bennett and his boys are now wanted for attempted murder, not just robbery. That raises the stakes considerably. But until they're caught, Miss Harrington is in danger," Kit pointed out. True enough, the sheriff agreed. I'd offer the jail as protection, but after what happened today, I'm not sure it would be any safer than here. She'll stay with us, Kit said firmly. Sam and the boys can take turns keeping watch. No one gets near this house without us knowing about it. Sheriff Dawson nodded. I'll send a deputy out to help, and I'll keep searching for Bennett. Sooner or later he'll slip up. What about my teaching position? Naomi asked. I was supposed to start on Monday. The town council met this morning after Kit told me what happened, Dawson said. They're holding your position. Mrs. Peterson will continue as substitute until it's safe for you to take over. Relief washed over Naomi. Thank you. After the sheriff left, promising to return the next day with a deputy, Kit insisted on checking the property boundaries himself. I won't be gone long, he told Naomi. Stay inside with Maria. As he rode out, Naomi couldn't help but notice how natural he looked in the saddle, moving as one with his horse across the open land. There was something undeniably appealing about his quiet confidence and sense of responsibility. The rest of the day passed without incident. Sam and the other ranch hands took turns patrolling the property, and Maria kept her shotgun close at hand. As evening fell, Kit returned, reporting no sign of trouble. But they'll be back, he said as they ate dinner. Bennett isn't a man to let things go. I feel terrible bringing this trouble to your home, Naomi said. You've already risked so much for me. Don't give it another thought, Kit replied. I've had trouble with Bennett before. This was inevitable. Later, as they sat by the fire, Naomi found herself studying Kit's profile in the flickering light. He was reading from a volume of Tennyson, his deep voice giving weight to the poet's words. It seemed incongruous, this rugged rancher reciting elegant verse, but somehow fitting. You read beautifully, she said when he paused. Kit looked almost embarrassed. My mother insisted on education, said just because we lived on the frontier didn't mean we had to think like frontiersmen. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. A shadow of old grief passed over his face. When she died, I nearly sold the ranch. Couldn't imagine keeping it going without her and my father, but this land gets in your blood. I understand that feeling, Naomi said. After my father died, our house in Boston felt empty. I kept expecting to hear his footsteps, his voice. Eventually, I couldn't bear it anymore. That's why I came west to find somewhere that didn't echo with ghosts. Kit nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a depth of understanding that took her breath away. And did you find that place? I thought Westcliffe might be it, she said ruefully. But my welcome hasn't exactly been encouraging. Don't judge the whole town by Bennett and his thugs, Kit said. Most folks in Westcliffe are good people. They're looking forward to having a proper teacher for their children. If I live long enough to teach them, Naomi said, then immediately regretted her dark humor. I'm sorry. That was morbid. To her surprise, Kit chuckled. A sense of humor in the face of danger is nothing to apologize for. It's one of the things that helps us survive out here. Is that what you do? Use humor to cope with the hardships, among other things. Kit's gaze returned to the fire. I find work helps, so do books and good company. The way he said those last words, with a glance in her direction, sent a flutter through Naomi's chest that had nothing to do with fear. The next few days settled into a cautious routine. Sheriff Dawson sent a deputy named Harley to help keep watch, and Kit's ranch hands maintained regular patrols. There was no sign of the Bennett gang, though no one believed they had given up. Naomi found ways to make herself useful around the ranch. She helped Maria with cooking and cleaning, assisted Kit with his correspondence and account books, and even taught reading lessons to Miguel, the youngest ranch hand, who had never had formal schooling. On the fourth night, after a quiet dinner, Kit suggested they take a short walk to watch the sunset. The deputy was on guard near the house, and Sam was patrolling the perimeter on horseback. "Are you sure it's safe?" Naomi asked, though she was eager for fresh air after days of confinement. "We'll stay close to the house," Kit assured her, "and I'll be armed." The evening was mild, with a gentle breeze stirring the grass. They walked to a small rise just beyond the corral where the view of the mountains was unobstructed. The setting sun painted the peaks in hues of gold and crimson, a sight so beautiful it made Naomi catch her breath. "I never tire of this view," Kit said, standing beside her. "Every sunset is different, but everyone reminds me why I stay here." "It's magnificent," Naomi agreed. "We had nothing like this in Boston." They stood in companionable silence as the colors deepened, then slowly faded to purple and blue. The first stars were appearing when Kit suddenly tensed, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "What is it?" Naomi whispered, instantly alert. "Not sure," he murmured. "Something moved by the north pasture fence." Naomi peered into the gathering dusk but could see nothing unusual. Kit's eyes, however, were fixed on a point in the distance, his body coiled with tension. "We should get back to the house," he said quietly. They had taken no more than 3 steps when a shot rang out, the bullet kicking up dirt at their feet. Kit's reaction was instantaneous. He grabbed Naomi around the waist and pulled her down behind a large boulder as more shots followed. "Bennett," he growled, drawing his revolver. "Stay down." From the house, they heard shouts and the sound of returning gunfire, the deputy and Maria responding to the attack. Kit fired several shots toward the source of the initial gunfire, then glanced at Naomi. "We're pinned down here," he said grimly. "The house is too far to make a run for it." Naomi nodded, trying to control her fear. "What can I do?" Before Kit could answer, a bullet ricocheted off the boulder, sending stone fragments flying. One caught Naomi across the cheek, drawing blood. "You're hurt," Kit said, his eyes darkening with anger. "It's just a scratch," Naomi assured him, though the cut stung fiercely. Kit's jaw tightened. He fired several more shots, then checked his ammunition. "I need you to do something for me," he said. "When I start firing again, I want you to run for that fallen tree trunk about 20 yards to our left. It's not perfect cover, but it's closer to the house and will give you a better angle to make a run for it when there's an opening." "What about you?" "I'll keep them occupied here, then follow when I can." Naomi shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a debate," Kit said firmly. "I promise to keep you safe, and that's what I'm going to do." Before she could protest further, he rose slightly and fired rapidly in the direction of their attackers. "Now," he hissed. "Go." Gathering her courage, Naomi sprinted for the fallen tree, her heart pounding in her ears. Bullets kicked up dirt around her, but none found their mark. She dived behind the rotting trunk, breathing hard. From her new position, she could see the north pasture more clearly. 3 men were using a stand of trees for cover as they exchanged fire with Kit. A 4th was trying to work his way around to flank them. Naomi looked around desperately for something she could use to help. Her gaze landed on a length of branch that had broken off the tree trunk. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. More shots rang out from the direction of the house, Sam and the deputy providing covering fire. One of Bennett's men cried out and fell, clutching his leg. The others intensified their fire in response. Naomi saw Kit take advantage of the distraction to make a dash toward her position. He was halfway there when the man who had been working around their flank emerged from behind a bush, his rifle aimed directly at Kit's back. Without thinking, Naomi grabbed the branch and lunged out from behind the tree trunk. With all her strength, she swung it at the man's legs. It connected with a solid thwack, sending him sprawling. His rifle discharged harmlessly into the air. Kit spun at the sound, his revolver already raised. He fired once, and the man dropped to the ground with a groan. Naomi stood frozen, the branch still clutched in her hands as Kit reached her side. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen," he said, pulling her back behind the tree trunk. "But thank you." Before Naomi could respond, hoofbeats thundered across the pasture, Sheriff Dawson and several deputies arriving from town. The remaining members of the Bennett gang, seeing they were now outnumbered, fired a few more shots before retreating into the darkness. "Are you hurt?" Kit asked, his eyes searching Naomi's face. "No," she replied, suddenly realizing she was trembling, "just frightened." Kit's hand came up to gently touch the cut on her cheek. "This needs tending to." "It's nothing," Naomi insisted. "What about the man He'll live," Kit said grimly. "Though he might wish otherwise when he's facing a judge." Sheriff Dawson approached, his gun still drawn. "Everyone all right? We're fine," Kit confirmed. "Did you get Bennett?" "Not yet," the sheriff replied. "But we got 2 of his men, including the one you shot. The others fled east. I've got deputies in pursuit." They made their way back to the house, where Maria was waiting with her shotgun still at the ready. Her eyes widened at the sight of the blood on Naomi's face. "It's just a scratch," Naomi assured her as the older woman hurried to fetch water and bandages. As Maria cleaned the cut, Sheriff Dawson questioned them about the attack. Kit described how Bennett and his men had tried to ambush them during their walk, and how Naomi had saved him from being shot in the back. "That was a mighty brave thing you did, Miss Harrington," the sheriff said with respect. Naomi shook her head. "I just reacted. I couldn't let him shoot Mr. Thomas." "Well, thanks to your quick thinking, we've got one of Bennett's key men in custody," Dawson said. "With any luck, he'll tell us where to find the others." After the sheriff and his deputies left, taking the wounded gang member with them, Maria insisted that Naomi rest. The adrenaline of the attack was wearing off, leaving her exhausted and sore. "I'll check the property once more before turning in," Kit said. "Try to get some sleep." Naomi nodded, but sleep seemed impossible after what had happened. She lay in bed, replaying the events in her mind, particularly the moment she'd swung that branch at the gunman. She'd never considered herself particularly brave or athletic, yet when Kit's life was in danger, she'd acted without hesitation. A soft knock at her door roused her from her thoughts. "Yes, it's Kit. May I come in?" Naomi sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders over her nightgown. "Yes, of course." Kit entered, still fully dressed. He looked tired but alert. "I wanted to check on you before I turned in. The property is secure, Sam, and I doubled the watch for tonight." "Thank you," Naomi said. "I'm fine, really, just a bit shaken." Kit hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "I owe you my life," he said quietly. "That man would have shot me in the back if not for you." "You saved me from a far worse fate," Naomi reminded him. "I'd say we're even." Kit shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "Not many women or men, for that matter, would have had the courage to do what you did tonight." "I didn't stop to think about courage," Naomi admitted. "I just couldn't bear the thought of you being hurt." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition. Kit's hand reached out to gently touch the bandage on her cheek. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Not anymore," Naomi whispered, acutely aware of his proximity, of the warmth of his hand against her skin. For a moment it seemed as if he might kiss her. But then he drew back, standing abruptly. "You should rest," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Tomorrow will be another long day." "Good night, Kit," Naomi said, oddly disappointed. As he moved toward the door, he paused, looking back at her. "Good night, Naomi, and thank you again." After he left, Naomi lay awake for a long time, her thoughts in turmoil. She barely knew this man, yet in the span of a few days, he had become impossibly important to her. Was it merely gratitude she felt? Or something deeper? The days that followed were tense but uneventful. Sheriff Dawson reported that Bennett and his remaining men had apparently fled the area, but no one was willing to assume the danger had passed. Naomi remained at the ranch, where at least she could be useful while waiting for the situation to be resolved. A week after the attack, Kit received a telegram from the sheriff. He read it with growing satisfaction. "Bennett's been captured," he announced to Naomi and Maria. "The marshal caught him trying to cross into New Mexico territory." "Thank God," Maria said, crossing herself. "Does this mean I can return to town?" Naomi asked, her feelings mixed. She was eager to begin her teaching duties, but the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Kit, caused an unexpected pang. "The sheriff thinks it would be best to wait until Bennett's been brought back and formally charged," Kit replied. "Just to be safe. His trial won't be for several weeks, but once he's behind bars in Denver, you should be out of danger." Naomi nodded, relieved to have a reprieve. "I'm grateful for your continued hospitality." "It's no hardship having you here," Kit said, his eyes meeting hers briefly before he looked away. "In fact, the place will seem quiet when you go." Over the next few days, Naomi found herself increasingly aware of Kit's presence, the sound of his voice, the way he moved, the rare but wonderful occasions when he laughed. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression thoughtful, but he maintained a careful distance between them, never again coming as close as he had the night of the attack. 2 weeks after Bennett's capture, Sheriff Dawson rode out to the ranch with news. "Bennett and his men are being transported to Denver tomorrow," he informed them over coffee in Kit's kitchen. "They'll stand trial for multiple charges, including the attempted murder of Miss Harrington. The prosecutor believes they'll be sentenced to at least 20 years in prison, if not hanged." "So it's over?" Naomi asked. "It appears so," the sheriff confirmed. "The town council is eager for you to take up your teaching duties. The children have been without proper instruction for too long." "I can be ready to move to town tomorrow," Naomi said, though the words brought no joy. "No need to rush," Kit said quickly. "The school term doesn't start for another week. You're welcome to stay until then." Sheriff Dawson's eyes moved between them, a knowing look crossing his face. "That seems sensible," he agreed. "Give you time to prepare for your classes." After the sheriff left, an awkward silence fell between Naomi and Kit. They had grown comfortable with each other during the danger, but now that it was passing, uncertainty crept in. "I should return your sister's dresses," Naomi said finally, "and repay you for all you've done." "There's no need for payment," Kit said, his voice clipped. "And keep the dresses. Bella won't miss them." "Still, I can't leave without expressing my gratitude. You saved my life, gave me shelter, and you saved my life in return," Kit interrupted. "As you said before, we're even." Naomi felt stung by his tone. "Of course. Well, I should begin packing my things." She retreated to her room, fighting tears that made no sense. What had she expected? That he would ask her to stay? That was absurd. She had a position waiting in town, responsibilities to fulfill. And Kit had his ranch to run. Their paths had crossed by chance, not design. Yet as she folded the borrowed dresses, Naomi couldn't deny the ache in her chest. Somehow, in the midst of danger and fear, she had developed feelings for Kit Thomas, feelings that went far beyond gratitude. That evening at dinner, the atmosphere was strained. Maria kept glancing between them, her expression concerned. Kit ate little, his attention seemingly focused on his plate rather than his companions. After the meal, Naomi helped Maria with the dishes, then announced her intention to retire early. Kit merely nodded, not looking up from the book he was pretending to read. In her room, Naomi sat by the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. She would miss this view, this house, these people. especially one person. A knock at her door startled her. "Yes, it's Maria. May I come in?" "Of course." The older woman entered, carrying a small wooden box. "I thought you might like to have this," she said, placing it on the bed. "It's not much, but it might be useful for a teacher." Naomi opened the box to find a collection of pencils, a small inkwell, and several sheets of fine paper. "Maria, this is lovely, but I can't accept, please," Maria interrupted. "Consider it a gift from a friend." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, I will treasure it." Maria sat beside her on the bed. "You know, I have known Senor Kit since he was born. I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. "I don't understand, don't you?" Maria's eyes were kind but knowing. "He cares for you deeply. But he is a proud man, and he believes you deserve better than a rancher." "That's ridiculous," Naomi said. "Kit is the finest man I've ever known." "Perhaps you should tell him that," Maria suggested, patting her hand, "before it's too late." After Maria left, Naomi sat for a long time considering her words. Could it be true? Did Kit care for her as she had come to care for him? And if so, why would he let her leave without a word? Unable to sleep, she decided to get some fresh air. The house was quiet as she made her way to the front door, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the night chill. The porch was empty except for Kit, who sat in a rocking chair, staring out at the darkness. He started when she appeared, half rising from his seat. "Naomi. Is everything all right?" "I couldn't sleep," she said, moving to stand beside him. "May I join you?" He gestured to the other chair. "Of course." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds: crickets chirping, the occasional hoot of an owl, the distant neigh of a horse in the corral. "I'll miss this place," Naomi said finally. "It's become a home to me." Kit's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "You'll be comfortable in town. The teachers' quarters are small but adequate." "Yes, I'm sure they are." Naomi took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Kit, there's something I need to say before I go." He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. "What is it?" "I want to thank you, not just for saving my life, but for everything that came after, for showing me kindness and respect, for making me feel safe." She paused. "For making me feel valued." "You are valued," Kit said quietly. "More than you know." Encouraged, Naomi continued. "These past weeks have been difficult in many ways, but they've also been special. Being here with you has made me see things differently, made me see myself differently." "How so?" "I always thought of myself as someone who needed protection, someone who couldn't stand on her own. But here I discovered I'm stronger than I knew. I faced danger and didn't break." She smiled faintly. "I even saved a cowboy's life." Kit's expression softened. "You did that." "But the most important thing I discovered," Naomi said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, "is that sometimes when you're not looking for it at all, you can find something precious. Something you never knew you wanted until it was there before you." Kit went very still. "Naomi, I care for you, Kit," she said simply. "More than I should, perhaps, after so short an acquaintance, but there it is, and I couldn't leave without telling you." The silence that followed seemed endless. Then Kit rose from his chair and came to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "I've been a fool," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Telling myself you'd be better off in town, that a schoolteacher had no business with a rancher, that what I felt was just protective instinct." Hope bloomed in Naomi's chest. "And what do you feel?" "Something I never expected to feel again after my parents died," Kit admitted. "Something that terrifies me more than any outlaw's gun." "Tell me," Naomi urged gently. Kit's eyes met hers, filled with a vulnerability she'd never seen in them before. "I love you, Naomi Harrington. I think I have since the moment I cut you free from those tracks and saw the courage in your eyes, even through your fear." Joy washed over Naomi like a warm wave. "Oh, Kit, I love you too." His hands tightened on hers. "I have no right to ask you to give up your position in town. Teaching is your calling and you'll be wonderful at it." "It is my calling," Naomi agreed. "But that doesn't mean I can't have other dreams as well." Kit searched her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Westcliffe isn't so far from here. That perhaps a rancher and a schoolteacher could find a way to build a life together, if they wanted it badly enough." A slow smile spread across Kit's face, the most open, unguarded expression she'd seen from him. "Are you proposing to me, Miss Harrington?" Naomi laughed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "I believe I am, Mr. Thomas, though it's hardly proper." "Proper be damned," Kit said, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and firm against hers, his hands gentle as they cradled her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kit rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he murmured. "Someone who understands this life, who isn't afraid of its hardships." "I never thought I'd find a home so far from where I was born," Naomi replied. "But home isn't a place, is it? It's the people who matter to us." They stayed on the porch until the eastern sky began to lighten, talking of the future, how Naomi would teach in town during the week, returning to the ranch on weekends and holidays. How, in time, they might build a school closer to the ranch for the children of the surrounding farms. How their lives, which had seemed so separate, might weave together into something stronger and more beautiful than either had imagined alone. As the sun rose, painting the mountains in gold once more, Kit took Naomi's hand. "I should do this properly," he said, dropping to one knee. "Naomi Harrington, will you marry me? Not because I saved you or you saved me, but because together we're better than we are apart." "Yes," Naomi said without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Westcliffe. The town council, far from being disappointed, was delighted that their new teacher had found such a respected husband. Arrangements were made for Naomi to live at the school during the week, but everyone understood that her true home would be at the Thomas Ranch. They were married 3 months later in the town's small church, with Sheriff Dawson giving the bride away and Maria beaming proudly from the front pew. The entire town turned out for the celebration afterward, including many of Naomi's students, who presented her with a handmade quilt as a wedding gift. As autumn turned to winter, Naomi settled into her dual life, dedicated teacher during the week, rancher's wife on weekends. It was not always easy. The journey between town and ranch could be arduous, especially in bad weather. But every time she saw Kit waiting for her at the end of the road, his face lighting up at the sight of her, she knew she had made the right choice. On a snowy evening in December, as they sat by the fire in their home, Kit presented Naomi with a small package. "What's this?" she asked, unwrapping it carefully. "A reminder," Kit said, "of how we found each other." Inside was a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a train. Naomi laughed through sudden tears. "It's perfect," she said, allowing him to fasten it around her neck. "I never thought I'd be grateful to the Bennett gang," Kit mused, pulling her close. "But if they hadn't tied you to those tracks, I might never have found the love of my life. And I might never have discovered my own strength," Naomi added, "or learned that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the best destinations." Outside, snow fell softly on the ranch that was now truly her home, covering the land in a blanket of pure white. Inside, wrapped in the arms of the man she loved, Naomi Harrington Thomas knew a peace and contentment she had never thought possible. From the moment of terror on those railroad tracks to this quiet evening by the fire, her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. And she wouldn't change a single moment of the journey. Spring came to the Colorado foothills with a burst of wildflowers and new life. The ranch flourished under Kit and Naomi's care, as did the school in town, where Naomi had become a beloved teacher. The arrangement they had worked out, with Naomi teaching during the week and returning to the ranch on weekends, had its challenges, but the joy of their reunions made the separations worthwhile. On a warm Friday afternoon in May, Naomi dismissed her students early, eager to begin her weekend journey home. As the children scattered, she gathered her books and papers, humming softly to herself. "You seem happy today, Mrs. Thomas." Naomi turned to find Mrs. Peterson, one of the town council members, standing in the doorway of the schoolhouse. "I am, Mrs. Peterson. The children did wonderfully on their examinations, and I'm looking forward to seeing my husband." The older woman smiled knowingly. "You two are still newlyweds after all. Though I must say this arrangement seems to be working well for everyone. The children adore you." "And I them," Naomi said sincerely. "Teaching brings me such joy. As does that handsome rancher of yours, I imagine." Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "Will you be needing a ride to the edge of town?" "My son is bringing the wagon around shortly." "Thank you, but Kit is meeting me today." Naomi touched the silver train pendant that rarely left her neck. "We have plans for the weekend." Indeed, they did have plans, though Naomi hadn't shared them with anyone yet. She had been feeling unusually tired lately, with bouts of morning sickness that confirmed what she had begun to suspect weeks ago. Today, she would tell Kit that their family was growing. As she finished packing her satchel, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her heart quicken. She hurried to the window, smiling at the sight of Kit riding into the schoolyard. Even after months of marriage, the sight of him still took her breath away. "Your husband is here, Mrs. Thomas," called one of the remaining students, a young boy who was waiting for his older sister. "Thank you, Timothy," Naomi replied, unable to keep the joy from her voice. She stepped outside just as Kit dismounted. He removed his hat, revealing hair slightly longer than when they'd first met, with a few strands of silver at the temples that Naomi found impossibly attractive. "Mrs. Thomas," he said formally, though his eyes danced with private humor. "Mr. Thomas," she replied with equal formality, then broke into a smile as he swept her into an embrace that lifted her off her feet. "I missed you," he murmured against her hair. "It's only been 5 days," Naomi reminded him, though she had missed him just as fiercely. 5 days too many. Kit set her down gently, taking her satchel. "Ready to go home, home." The word still filled Naomi with warmth, more than ready. Kit had brought a second horse for her, a gentle mare named Willow, that he'd purchased specifically for Naomi's journeys between town and ranch. As they rode side by side out of Westcliffe, Naomi felt the weight of her responsibilities as a teacher slipping away, replaced by the anticipation of the weekend ahead. "How were the examinations?" Kit asked as they followed the winding road that led toward the ranch. "Excellent." Even young Billy Miller, who struggled so much at the beginning of the term, passed with high marks. Naomi couldn't keep the pride from her voice. "And how were things at the ranch?" "Productive. The new calves are doing well, and Sam thinks this year's crop will be our best yet." Kit glanced at her. "Maria has been cooking all day, says you're too thin." Naomi laughed. "Maria always thinks I'm too thin, though I suspect that won't be a complaint for much longer." Kit looked at her curiously, but Naomi merely smiled, saving her news for a more private moment. As they crested the final hill before the ranch came into view, Kit reined his horse to a stop. Naomi followed suit, looking at him questioningly. "I wanted to show you something," he said, gesturing to a spot about half a mile from the main house, where a small structure was taking shape. "It's not much yet, but by next fall it should be ready." Naomi squinted against the late afternoon sun. Is that a schoolhouse? Kit nodded, a hint of uncertainty in his expression. I know you love teaching in town and this isn't meant to pressure you. But I thought, for the children of the surrounding ranches who can't make it to Westcliffe regularly. Kit, Naomi breathed, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. It's perfect. You don't have to decide anything now, he hurried to add. It could be used for other things if you prefer to continue in town. No, I love the idea. Naomi's mind was already racing with possibilities. The Cooper children, the Richardsons, the Martinez family, none of them can attend regularly in town because of the distance. This would make such a difference. Kit's face relaxed into a smile. I hoped you'd see it that way. Sam's brother is a carpenter. He's doing most of the work. It's the most wonderful surprise, Naomi said sincerely. And I have one for you as well. Kit raised an eyebrow. Oh. Naomi took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite her certainty that Kit would be as happy as she was about the news. Perhaps we should wait until we're home. Kit studied her face, then nodded. All right, though you've certainly piqued my curiosity. They continued down the hill toward the ranch house, where smoke curled invitingly from the chimney and Maria could be seen moving about in the kitchen window. As always, the sight filled Naomi with a sense of belonging that had been missing from her life for so long. After stabling the horses and washing away the dust of the journey, they gathered at the kitchen table where Maria had prepared a feast: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and an apple pie cooling on the windowsill. You're spoiling us, Maria, Naomi said as the older woman set the food before them. Nonsense. You work too hard, both of you. Maria's sharp eyes took in Naomi's face. You look tired, Nina. Are you feeling well? I'm fine, Naomi assured her, exchanging a quick glance with Kit. Just ready for a quiet weekend at home. After dinner, Kit suggested they take their coffee on the porch to watch the sunset, a ritual they had established early in their marriage. As they settled into the rocking chairs, Kit reached for Naomi's hand. Now, about this surprise, he prompted gently. Naomi set aside her coffee cup and turned to face him, her heart suddenly racing. It's something I've been suspecting for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before I told you. Kit's expression grew concerned. You're not ill, are you? No, not ill, Naomi said, smiling at his immediate worry. Though I may be a bit indisposed over the next several months, understanding dawned slowly on Kit's face. Naomi, are you saying? We're going to have a baby, she confirmed, her voice catching with emotion. In late November, according to my calculations. For a moment, Kit seemed frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Then he let out a whoop of joy that surely could be heard all the way to Westcliffe, sweeping Naomi out of her chair and into his arms. A baby, he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. Our baby. You're happy then? Naomi asked, though his reaction left little doubt. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Kit said, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach. I never thought I'd have a family of my own after my parents died. Then you came into my life, and now this. His voice broke with emotion. Naomi leaned into his embrace, her own eyes filling with tears of joy. I know, it's more than I ever dreamed possible. They stood together on the porch as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Two people who had found each other against all odds, now preparing to welcome a new life into their home. We should tell Maria, Kit said finally, reluctant to release Naomi from his arms. I suspect she already knows, Naomi replied with a laugh. That woman doesn't miss much. Indeed, when they returned to the kitchen, Maria took one look at their radiant faces and nodded with satisfaction. I knew it, she declared. A mother knows these things. You're not my mother, Maria, Kit pointed out, though his smile remained firmly in place. I have been taking care of you since you were in diapers, Kieran Thomas, Maria retorted. That is close enough. Her stern expression softened as she turned to Naomi. You will need to rest more. No more riding back and forth to town in your condition. I still have several months of teaching left before the baby comes, Naomi protested. I can't abandon my students. We'll figure something out, Kit assured her, his hand protectively at the small of her back. Perhaps you could stay in town during the week for now, and I'll come to you on weekends instead. The thought of spending weeknights in the small teacher's quarters rather than in Kit's arms was unappealing, but Naomi nodded. That might be best, at least until summer break. Maria sniffed, clearly disapproving of any arrangement that didn't involve Naomi resting constantly under her watchful eye. We will discuss this tomorrow, she said firmly. Tonight, you rest. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Naomi continued teaching in Westcliffe, though as her pregnancy progressed, she found the weekly journeys increasingly tiring. Kit insisted on accompanying her each way, refusing to let her travel alone despite the inconvenience to his ranch work. The small schoolhouse near the ranch took shape quickly, ready for use by the time Naomi's teaching term ended in early summer. As her belly grew, she spent pleasant afternoons planning lessons and gathering books for what would become the Rainbow Valley School, named for the vivid wildflowers that carpeted the nearby meadow. By October, Naomi was confined mostly to the ranch, her advanced pregnancy making travel difficult. But she didn't mind. The quiet days gave her time to prepare for the baby, sewing tiny garments and reading from the collection of children's books Kit had ordered from Denver. On a crisp November morning with the first snow of the season dusting the mountains, Naomi awoke to sharp pains that told her the baby was coming. Kit, who had barely left her side in the past week, was instantly alert. "Is it time?" he asked, his voice steady though his eyes betrayed his anxiety. Naomi nodded, gripping his hand as another contraction seized her. "Send for the midwife." The next 12 hours were a blur of pain, determination, and finally, overwhelming joy as their son entered the world with a lusty cry that declared his health to all within earshot. "He has your eyes," Naomi whispered exhaustedly as Kit cradled the newborn with trembling hands. "And your spirit," Kit replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at him fighting already." Indeed, the baby was waving his tiny fists, his face red with the effort of his cries. The midwife, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Holloway, chuckled as she cleaned up. "That's a strong boy you've got there," she declared. "What will you call him?" Kit and Naomi exchanged a look. They had discussed names at length but hadn't made a final decision. "James," Naomi said softly. "After the sheriff who helped bring us together." "James Thomas," Kit agreed, placing the swaddled infant in Naomi's arms. "Welcome to the world, son." The winter passed in a haze of sleepless nights and joyful discoveries, as little James grew and developed his own personality, determined like his father, observant like his mother. By spring, Naomi was eager to resume teaching, though leaving James, even in Maria's capable hands, proved harder than she had anticipated. The Rainbow Valley School opened officially in April, with 12 students ranging from 6 to 14 years of age. The nearby ranch families were grateful for the opportunity to educate their children without the long journey to Westcliffe, and Naomi found that teaching in this intimate setting, with James often napping in a cradle beside her desk, brought a satisfaction different from but equal to her work in town. Kit, watching his wife blossom in her dual roles as mother and teacher, felt a contentment he had never thought possible. The ranch was prospering, their family was healthy, and the future stretched before them full of promise. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Kit surprised Naomi with a special dinner after the children had been dismissed from school. He had arranged for Maria to take James for the evening, setting up a table beneath the cottonwood trees near the creek that ran through their property. "This is beautiful," Naomi exclaimed, taking in the white tablecloth, the silver candelabra, the bottle of wine cooling in the stream. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to spoil my wife?" Kit asked, pulling out her chair. "No, but this seems rather elaborate for an ordinary day." Kit smiled mysteriously. "Perhaps I have something to celebrate." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "I received a letter today," Kit said, pouring the wine, "from the territorial governor's office. They're establishing a new school board for the region, and they've asked me to serve as a representative for the rural schools." "Kit, that's wonderful," Naomi exclaimed. "Your work on our schoolhouse must have impressed them." "It wasn't my work they were impressed by," Kit corrected her. "It was your teaching. Apparently, word has spread about the quality of education at Rainbow Valley. The governor's educational advisor visited last month without our knowledge." Naomi's eyes widened. "That man from Denver who said he was considering moving to the area, the very same. He was evaluating rural schools throughout the territory." Kit raised his glass. "To my brilliant wife, who has not only created a haven of learning for our local children but has now caught the attention of the territorial government." Naomi blushed, but raised her glass in return. "And to my supportive husband, without whom none of this would be possible." They dined on Maria's finest cooking, talking of their plans for the future, expanding the school as more families moved to the area, possibly adding a second teacher to accommodate the growing number of students, and of course, watching James grow and perhaps welcoming siblings for him in the years to come. As the sun set, painting the sky in familiar hues of gold and crimson, Kit took Naomi's hand across the table. "You ever think about that day?" he asked quietly. "When I found you on the tracks." Naomi touched the silver train pendant she still wore daily. "Often. It was the worst and best day of my life. Worst because I truly believed I was going to die, best because it brought me to you." "I've never told you this," Kit said, his voice low, "but I almost didn't ride out that way that day. I had planned to check the south pasture instead. Something just pulled me toward the tracks." "Providence," Naomi suggested. "Or fate," Kit agreed. "Either way, I thank God every day that I followed that instinct." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I never thought I could be this happy, Naomi, that I could have this kind of life." "Nor did I," Naomi admitted. "When I left Boston, I was simply running away from grief and debt. I never imagined I was running toward such joy." They walked back to the house hand in hand as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The ranch was quiet, peaceful. In the distance, the lights of the schoolhouse glowed softly. Kit had installed lamps for the evening adult classes Naomi had begun offering twice a week. At the house, Maria greeted them with a sleeping James in her arms. "He was an angel," she reported, transferring the baby to Naomi. "Barely cried at all." "Thank you for watching him," Kit said, dropping a kiss on Maria's weathered cheek. "PFFT. "As if that is a hardship," Maria scoffed, though her eyes softened as she gazed at the baby. "He is the joy of my old age, that one." After Maria had retired to her cabin, Kit and Naomi stood in the nursery, watching their son sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, his dark lashes casting shadows on chubby cheeks. "Sometimes I still can't believe he's real," Naomi whispered, leaning against Kit's solid warmth. "That any of this is real." "It's real," Kit assured her, his arms encircling her waist, "and it's just the beginning." Over the next few years, the Thomas family flourished alongside their ranch and school. James grew from an infant to a sturdy, curious toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's quick mind. The Rainbow Valley School expanded to include 20 students, necessitating the addition of a second teacher, a young woman named Miss Franklin, who had trained under Naomi in Westcliffe. In the spring of James's third year, Naomi gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, named after Kit's mother. Where James was bold and adventurous, little Elizabeth was thoughtful and observant, watching the world with serious eyes before deciding to participate. Sheriff Dawson, now sporting gray in his mustache but still sharp as ever, remained a frequent visitor to the ranch. He had been named godfather to both Thomas' children and took his duties seriously, bringing books for James and a delicate silver bracelet for Elizabeth's christening. "Have you heard the news from Denver?" he asked one Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the children play in the yard. Maria was supervising, her dark eyes missing nothing despite her advancing years. "What news?" Kit asked, refilling the sheriff's coffee cup. "They're talking about statehood again. Looks like it might actually happen this time." Dawson sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "Colorado could be a state by next year. That would change things," Naomi remarked. "For the schools especially." "For everything," Dawson agreed. "More structure, more resources, but also more rules and regulations." "Progress comes at a cost," Kit observed, watching James help his little sister climb onto a wooden horse he'd carved himself. "But it brings opportunities too." The conversation turned to other matters, the new railway spur being built to connect Westcliffe more directly to Denver, the expanding cattle market, the growing population of the region. Through it all, Naomi felt a deep sense of contentment, a certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Naomi found Kit on the porch, gazing at the stars. She slipped her arms around his waist, resting her cheek against his back. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmured. Kit turned, drawing her into his embrace. "I was thinking about what Dawson said, about statehood. And how different my life would have been if I'd left Colorado after my parents died, as I once planned to do." Kit's voice was reflective. "I almost sold the ranch, you know, had a buyer lined up and everything." "What changed your mind?" Naomi asked, though she had heard parts of this story before. "Isabella. She convinced me to give it one more year." Kit smiled at the memory of his sister's determination. "Said I'd regret it if I didn't. She was right, as usual." "I'm glad she persuaded you," Naomi said sincerely. "Though I suppose if you had left, I'd never have known what I was missing." "Or you might have been tied to those tracks with no one to save you," Kit said, his voice darkening at the thought. Naomi shuddered slightly. "Let's not think about that. Everything happened as it was meant to." Kit tightened his arms around her. "Indeed it did, Mrs. Thomas. Indeed it did." In the years that followed, the Thomas family witnessed many changes. Colorado achieved statehood in 1876, bringing new governance and structure to their lives. The railway expanded, making travel and commerce easier. Westcliffe grew from a small frontier town to a respectable settlement with a proper courthouse, a bank, and eventually, electric lighting. The Rainbow Valley School flourished, becoming known throughout the region for its progressive teaching methods and high standards. Many of Naomi's former students went on to college in Denver or even back east, returning with knowledge and skills that benefited the entire community. James, following in his father's footsteps, developed a keen interest in ranching and land management. By the time he was 16, he was practically running the cattle operation alongside Kit, introducing new breeding techniques he'd read about in agricultural journals. Elizabeth, quieter but no less determined, showed a talent for medicine after helping the local doctor treat a neighbor's child during a scarlet fever outbreak. When she announced her intention to attend medical school, still a rarity for women, Kit and Naomi supported her wholeheartedly, having always encouraged their children to pursue their passions regardless of convention. And through it all, the love between Kit and Naomi remained the steady foundation upon which their family life was built. They had weathered challenges together: drought years that threatened the ranch, a fire that destroyed part of the schoolhouse, the loss of dear friends including, eventually, Sheriff Dawson, who passed peacefully in his sleep after serving Westcliffe for over 20 years. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children arranged a surprise celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and former students from miles around. The yard was decorated with lanterns and wildflowers, tables groaning with food prepared by Maria, now in her 70s, but still ruling the kitchen with an iron hand, and her nieces who had come to help as she aged. As twilight fell and music played, James on the guitar, his father had taught him to play, accompanied by Elizabeth on the piano that had been Kit's anniversary gift to Naomi years before the couple found a moment alone near the creek where they had dined on their first anniversary. 25 years, Naomi marveled, her arm linked through Kit's. It hardly seems possible. Kit, his dark hair now liberally streaked with silver but his blue eyes as intense as ever, smiled down at her. The best 25 years any man could ask for, even with all the challenges. Especially with the challenges, Kit affirmed. They only made us stronger. Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the celebration from a distance. James was dancing with his sweetheart, a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. Elizabeth was deep in conversation with the town's doctor, who had become her mentor. Their friends and neighbors moved among the tables, sharing stories and laughter. "You remember what I told you the night I proposed?" Kit asked suddenly. Naomi smiled, the memory vivid despite the passage of time. "You said we should marry not because you saved me or I saved you, but because together we're better than we are apart." "I still believe that," Kit said, turning to face her fully. "Every day with you has proven it true." "As it has for me," Naomi replied softly. "I can't imagine any other life than the one we've built together." Kit reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I have something for you, for our anniversary." Curious, Naomi opened it to find a delicate gold locket. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of Kit and Naomi on their wedding day, the other a recent portrait of James and Elizabeth. "It's beautiful," she breathed, touching it gently. "Turn it over," Kit urged. On the back was engraved a simple phrase, "From tracks to forever." Tears filled Naomi's eyes as Kit fastened the locket around her neck, alongside the silver train pendant she still wore daily. "It's perfect," she whispered. "As are you," Kit replied, his voice husky with emotion. "Thank you for these 25 years, Naomi. For our children, our home, our life together." "Thank you for saving me that day," Naomi said simply. "Not just from the train, but from a life half lived. You gave me everything I never knew I wanted." As they rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the family and community they had built together, both reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment, a journey that began with terror and desperation on a set of railroad tracks outside Westcliffe, and had led to a life richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined. Their story, which might have ended before it began on that fateful day, had instead become a testament to courage, love, and the unexpected paths that lead us home. From the moment Kit had cut Naomi free from those tracks, they had been saving each other in countless ways, building a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. and as they danced under the stars to the music their children played, both knew with absolute certainty that they would continue doing so for all the years to come.